camera? There you go. Keep it steady.
No, I don't see where it's wrapping up. It's trying a whole bunch of different places. Look right on the end there, maybe it's wrapping. Right on the end.
Look at my head. How bad is it?
Holy
Is it wide open?
I can't see. It's pretty bad.
Really bad, or is it stitches?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Look,
I can't.
you look?
I can't tell.
All right. Oh my God. How bad is it?
I mean, it's bleeding pretty profusely.
Good morning, everybody. Let's try this again. This is a live briefing with Tropical Storm Elsa weakening a bit as it's battling dry air in the open Atlantic, and also a tilted storm now with that low-level center becoming exposed, becoming a bit decoupled from that mid-level center. But first, I wanted to show you this video 9 years ago today, July 3rd, 2012. This was a tornado in Saskatchewan where I was trying to use a RC vehicle to try to intercept this. The Dominators were a little bit broken down by this point in the season by July, so I was trying to use an RC vehicle to intercept. And when I was pulling open the back hatch, I slammed my head against the armored back hatch, split it open. I could feel the tickling happen, the blood coming down the forehead as well during that. And we were able to continue the chase. I was able to use duct tape and patch up the cut. Use my hat a little bit to apply pressure to the wound. And then we met up with Sean's chauffeur. That was when I met Sean out there. And he brought out a first aid kit. So Sean is a firefighter and always has that first aid kit with him. And thankfully he was able to apply emergency first aid. And we were able to continue this chase. I didn't get the RC vehicle into the tornado because you get such a crosswind when those smaller lightweight vehicles are on approach to the tornado that it will just get blown off. So it was kind of a bad test, kind of a futile effort, but still fun. July is definitely a time with big tornadoes, especially across the high plains here, and I'll be storm chasing today as well across the high plains of Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. I think that the main threat is going to be large hail, damaging winds, and maybe a flash flood threat as well. So I'm going to be targeting out close to Lyman for this event, and I do think that there is a chance even of an isolated tornado out there because it's Colorado. But there you can see that debris cloud from July 3rd, 2012 after intercept. And then that night, I went to sleep in a hotel. We had driven all day, all night to get up there, and fell asleep in the hotel and woke up the next day, and the whole thing was covered in blood. And I realized that it was time to go to the doctor. Very thankful for Canada Healthcare up there, and was able to go to the doctor and get that patch. Also was able to get some steroids as well because I was a little bit sick there, or strep throat or something else that was happening after grinding out that whole entire season. But that was an intense memory there on July 3rd, 2012. Overall, 2012 was a relatively quiet season for severe weather. And similar to 2020, I would say that 2012 reminded me a lot of 2020, as did 2006. But here is Tropical Storm Elsa that has weakened overnight into a tropical storm, still hauling ass at 25 to 30 miles an hour, east to west direction. And that very rapid forward speed in combination with all the dry air associated with that monster subtropical high off to its north has led to a tilted system, and the low-level center actually moving out from underneath this mid-level circulation and the abundance of convection there. And once that low-level center gets decoupled from that convection, then it's no longer as effective of a heat engine when you have a vertically oriented heat engine. In that case, it takes the heat from the ocean, a lot of runaway condensation as those thunderstorm updrafts will lift that air immediately to its dew point, and that's when you get the heat engine and that transport of heat from the ocean surface to a loft in the atmosphere, and that happens most efficiently when you have a very vertically oriented heat engine from the low-level circulation all the way up. Once they start getting tilted like this and they get a little bit decoupled, that's when they're starting to weaken. And you can certainly see that exposed center here on visible satellite. You got a little supercell storm erupting out on a lead outer band there with the system. And if you were to look at water vapor or infrared, then it looks like this is a healthy, well-organized system. And you might think that the center is located about here. You've got these little overshooting tops of convection. But then you look at the visible satellite and you can see that the center is actually moving out from underneath that deeper convection, and that leads to a system that is tilted from the east to the west with height. if you were looking at this in a 3D type of a sense. And for that reason, this storm has weakened into a tropical storm, and it looks like it's going to continue to weaken as it passes between Jamaica, right on the outer tip of Haiti there. And there definitely could be some flash flooding potential across Hispaniola, also across Jamaica, even though you'll likely be on the dry side of the system. And that forecast track has shifted just a little bit to the north, and now it's coming right over the heart of Cuba. And this little swath here right near the western tip of Cuba that includes Havana is a relatively low-lying area, very flat part of Cuba with the mountains located a little bit further out here. And really, if a tropical cyclone or an intense hurricane is approaching from the Caribbean from south to north and it passes over this relatively low area in Cuba, then that tropical cyclone or hurricane likely won't lose very much strength. And that's how many of the very powerful hurricanes that hit Key West, they usually come in from the south, from the due south, and pass over that relatively low-lying area that's relatively flat on the western tip of Cuba. This one, though, is coming in from the southeast, so it passes over a lot of those mountains that are located over central and eastern Cuba. So there's a chance that this thing may not even be identifiable when it finally moves over those mountains of Cuba. And with this weaker storm now, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing even recurves and could even miss Florida completely next week. But the official forecast track still has a tropical storm impacting the west coast of Florida during the early to middle portion of next week, a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday type of a situation. And already on satellite, you can see that this Bermuda high is starting to break down. This trough on the east coast is starting to erode that high pressure, starting to cause it to get a little bit deflected off to the east of Bermuda instead of just having this massive sprawling high. The European model has always shown the Bermuda high to get weakened by this east coast trough, which is a little bit stronger. The GFS, though, showed this subtropical high hanging on through the weekend, and this trough becoming weaker and then shearing out over the top of it. That would have led to a Gulf of Mexico storm, a stronger storm, potentially with bigger impacts along the central Gulf Coast. But it does look like this Bermuda high is getting eroded on the western edge, so there is a chance that the European model is onto something with that weaker, hardly identifiable tropical cyclone lifting off to the north and east and then eventually missing the east coast completely. So it looks like there's land interaction that's going to cause continued weakening of the storm, in addition to the dry air here on the south edge of that Bermuda high, and the fast forward speed causing the tilt and a tendency for the low-level circulation to get decoupled from this convection, and then it's just not as much of a heat engine anymore, which is the whole purpose of these tropical cyclones. It's to transport heat from the surface of the ocean aloft in the atmosphere and from the lower latitudes up toward the poles due to the uneven heating of the Earth, or those higher sun angles along the equator and the lower latitudes compared to the poles. But still, we need to keep a very close eye on this over the southeastern U.S. We all know how these things go. Yesterday, we're thinking this is going to be a more powerful type of a hurricane. Today, we're backing off of that a bit as it's weakened overnight. And now we've got this tropical storm throughout the projected path. This is the official NHC track, and you can see how the uncertainty gets a lot greater as you get a little closer to the southeast. But still, you don't have any cone here showing a recurve and missing the U.S. completely. The cone of uncertainty definitely includes Florida, and could be very well some impacts as this weaker tropical storm approaches the Florida Peninsula. But really nothing is changing from yesterday in terms of the official NHC forecast track, still showing a pretty stout tropical storm of equivalent intensity impacting the Florida Peninsula there toward the early to middle portion of next week. And as I mentioned, the intensity models, this is on the tropicaltidbits.com website. They have responded overnight with the weaker storm and really show this storm right now at peak intensity over the coming days. You can see that secondary peak, little secondary hump in intensity. That's after it passes over Cuba and then moves out over the Florida Strait, also over the very far eastern Gulf of Mexico. These intensity models do show that tropical storm gaining a little bit of strength, becoming a mid-range tropical storm there. But there's a chance that as this thing passes over Cuba, that it may not even be identifiable when it moves back over water. There's a decent chance that this thing could easily be a tropical depression when it impacts Florida. Could still be a hurricane, but the wind shear also increases there over the eastern Gulf of Mexico next week. We start to get some southwesterlies there over the far eastern Gulf, and that could also hamper any re-intensification effort that attempts to happen there over the Florida Straits and the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So let's take a look and see what the new models are showing here. Wow. Wow. So the new GFS is coming out, the 12Z GFS, and it shows major disruption of this tropical storm over Cuba and being hardly identifiable as it emerges. There are a couple members that show a re-intensification into a more stout tropical storm with a further west track. But we do still have these members that are recurving Tropical Storm Elsa, missing the eastern U.S. completely with this weaker Bermuda high. And it looks like on satellite that trough is quite effective at weakening that anticyclone. We may actually have a further east track here over central and eastern Cuba, over the northern Bahamas, and then recurving, missing the U.S. completely. A couple of members, though, are still a little bit further west, but you can see how diffuse this is. Even some short-term uncertainty over the next 24 hours there. Some of the GFS members are taking it toward Kingston again, but it looks like it's going to pass right over the tip of Haiti, a little bit further north as a weaker storm. Here are the hurricane models. Pretty much in agreement with that forecast track. You've got a couple of these members further east as well. But a weaker tropical storm, likely to get disrupted over the mountains here of central and eastern Cuba, and then re-emerging over the Florida Strait, over the Florida Peninsula, and then lifting off to the northeast around the western periphery of that Bermuda High. And we've already looked at those intensity models as well. So now let's pivot on over, pivotal weather. We'll pivot on over to the severe weather threat here across the high plains. We got that monster high there now. It's going to come in. Here's that East Coast trough that is working to erode the high pressure downstream. That's over the northeast. This thing led to some tornadoes a few days ago across portions of the Delmarva, even a couple of tornado warnings in DC. So today we've got this northwesterly flow event, about 20 knots at 500. Very borderline bulk shear. But we do have these easterly winds at the low levels. Easterly winds here across northeastern Colorado. That could give us an extra 10 knots, maybe close to 30 knots of bulk shear there. So I do think there's going to be a couple isolated supercell structures, especially those that are able to rocket off to the southeast and turn more in a southeasterly direction. It does look like a majority of those easterlies kind of settle in here near the I-70 corridor. Lyman probably will work the Palmer Divide today. We'll have to take a look at the actual surface map as well. But we should get some easterlies funneled into that gap, maybe across northeastern Colorado as well. Looking at the dew points, plenty of moisture out here. That's why we do have this slight risk, and you can see the funneling of moisture up into the Palmer Divide here to the north of the Palmer. That might be an area to keep an eye on as well. Maybe out near Lyman would be a good target. 3-kilometer NAM firestorms initially up near Cheyenne, northern Colorado, and then it has a little Palmer Divide storm getting started by about 21Z. That's going to be about 3 p.m. And that storm's going to lift up toward the Lyman area, but these are going to turn off to the right as well, these mature storms. Shows another round developing a little bit closer to Denver. And then these things really get going across the open plains once they hit that moisture. A little bit of a linear configuration here across the Nebraska Panhandle. But really down here toward Lyman, that's likely where I'm going to target. Instability is good. Deep layer shear, quite marginal. And these storms will develop initially to the west of the moisture, Likely will develop some outflow boundaries that will push east, leading to reinvigorated storm development a little bit further east, closer to that Kansas border. It is possible that near about 6 p.m., some storms there on the far southern end could turn right into these southerlies and could develop. And look at these 300 millibar winds increasing to about 35 knots. Overtop these southeasterly winds at 15 knots. 25-degree dew point spreads, not too bad in the high plains. So there definitely is a threat of some transient supercell structures within this environment. Quite a bit of cape there as well across eastern Colorado. The HRRR probably overmixing the dew points, of course. So you got to just throw out that HRRR model. Stick to the RAT model for these high plains events. And it does show more instability just to the south of I-70. And storms are going to be turning to the right. Southeasterly movers today, moving into this instability axis. Let's take a look at the surface map and see how it looks across eastern Colorado here. I can see that we still do have good internet. Look at this moisture. You got a 55 dew point in Denver. Definitely showing some funneling to the north of Denver too, on the north side of that Denver cyclone. So up near Greeley, you've got an 83 over 62. You had that flooding rainfall out there a couple of days ago, 4 inches of rain over a 2-hour period, likely contributing to some inflated moisture up here across northeastern Colorado. Lyman, 77 over 62. That's a favorable dew point down there, banked up against the Palmer. You got a 61 down there, 62 Pueblo, Colorado Springs. So I'm leaning toward playing the Palmer Divide here, south of Denver. Maybe out near Lyman. I think you'll get another round that develops off the outflow of the initial round that develops off the higher terrain. But definitely some good monsoon season type moisture out here across the high plains. It's going to lead to vigorous development of severe thunderstorms. The Storm Prediction Center does have a slight risk out here, eastern Colorado into western Nebraska. No tornado threat, but the way things go down here, you could easily get tornadoes across the high plains, land spoots, tornadoes, hybrids, what have you. Abundance of cape, 2,500 cape already across eastern Colorado. And those are the easterlies that I'm interested in. See these easterly winds at 5 to 10 knots here, feeding into that area. You get a lot less in the way of easterlies across northeastern Colorado, and then you get southwesterlies ahead of that front in the Nebraska Panhandle. So I expect that southwestern South Dakota down through the Nebraska Panhandle, more of a linear mode. And then as you get into Colorado down here, the southern edge, you get some of those easterlies on the north side of the Palmer Divide, funneling into the gap in the terrain there. And that's why I do think that the Palmer target could be the one to go for today. And those will pass into the deeper moisture, turn right into these southeasterly winds, and that could generate enough wind shear out there near Lyman. I could see these storms developing near the Boulder area and then turning right toward Lyman and eventually hitting that moisture a little bit closer to I-70, maybe near the airport as well. So that could also be a decent play, but you want to look for those easterlies because you've got about 20 to 25 knots at 500 out of the northwest, so you really need those easterly, southeasterly winds to generate enough storm relative bulk shear to get a transient supercell or two out there. Couple of flash flood watches down into the higher terrain there of central and southern New Mexico. Keep an eye on it. Air quality issues up here as well. Denver, east of the foothills. So it doesn't look like much of a tornado threat today, but probably some severe storms. Big mega shelves out there. Maybe a land spout or two. We've got a couple of days of severe weather here across the high plains. This marginal risk, portions of this, well, there it is, day 2 has been upgraded off to the south down there in eastern New Mexico, Texas Panhandle, far southeastern Colorado. So we've got a couple of days of some high plains insanity on the western edge of that ridge that builds in. So I'm thinking about activating storm chase mode this afternoon to cover some of that severe weather. especially with the focus shifting away from Elsa. I knew when I woke up this morning there weren't very many text messages coming in about Elsa, so I knew it likely weakened during the overnight hours. And lo and behold, I check it out, and it's down to a tropical storm. Everybody amped, getting their vehicles all packed up to go to the southeast, and now it looks like more of a lower end tropical storm. But still, you got to treat it like it's going to have those life-threatening impacts. There's still going to be a life-threatening storm surge along those really low-lying areas associated with the tropical storm. Big flooding rainfall as well. Tornadoes in the eastern quadrant, likely across the Florida Peninsula. So there still are going to be big impacts regardless of what happens with this storm system. But I do have some good news, and that is that tropical cyclone Elsa has weakened quite a bit. So now I'm going to leave you with this July 3rd video, the 9-year anniversary of that big-time tornado intercept, and also splitting my head open there. And there you can see that tornado form. We initially thought this was going to be a very large tornado when it first touched down, but then it just consolidated into this very wispy rope with a little debris circulation on the ground. And I was just discussing with Sean the other day that you hardly see videos of wedges in Canada. I think that we intercepted probably 2 of the only wedges that I've ever seen video of. The Edmonton tornado there in the late 80s may have had a wedge stage, but it looked like more of a cone, stovepipe type of a tornado. And that's because this far north, you often don't get LCLs that are low enough to get those wedge tornadoes, even though you often get the kinematics, the dynamics up there appropriate for tornadic supercell storms. You just have slightly higher cloud bases up there as well. And they often, the tornadoes will look like they're going to be a big tornado when they're first about to touch down, and then they come down as this little wispy rope, which I definitely find interesting. But there you can see that wall cloud getting illuminated by the sun back behind us, illuminating that condensation there, starting to get better organized on the left side, and then eventually it consolidated, touched down, and we tried to deploy, and then I ended up splitting my head open. So thank you everybody for tuning in to this live briefing. There you can see that tornado vortex starting to get that more laminar appearance. Once they look a lot more smooth, that means that it is a funnel cloud, a tornado that is happening there. And you can definitely tell the difference between that blocky scud and the tornadoes. But I'm going to leave you with this video. Let it run. Thank you everybody for tuning into my weather reports. Have a great holiday weekend. Hope you guys have a great July 4th. Hope there are some amazing fireworks that you're able to enjoy. And here is a tornado video for you guys.
I got it. Oh yeah, I got it. It's on the ground. It's on the ground. There it is. There it is. It hurts. All dizzy. There's blood everywhere. Keep going. Wow, go, 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 go. Trying to deploy the RC drone, and definitely gonna need stitches.
Right here.
Bosch Icon wiper blades. How storm chasers clear the way.
Is it touching out the water? Anyway, we gotta get the path of it. Man, look at that. This could be a big one. How's the stream look? Oh yeah. What do you think? How big it is? We gotta get this RC thing. Get the RC deployed.
No, I don't see where it's wrapping up. It's trying a whole bunch of different places. Look right on the end there, maybe. It's wrapping right on the end.
Look at my head.
Jesus,
how bad is it?
Holy
How bad is it? Is it
pretty,
wide open?
I can't see. It's pretty bad.
Really bad, or is it?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Look,
I can't.
you look?
I can't tell.
All right.
Oh jeez.
Oh my God. How bad is it?
I mean, it's bleeding pretty profusely.
All right, let's get right next to it. We'll go to the hospital at the end. It hurts really bad though.
Yeah, I mean.
Did it look wide open?
I couldn't tell.
I hit it on the back. I got it. Oh, yeah, I got it. It's on the ground.
It's on the ground. There it is. There it is.
It hurt. All dizzy. There's blood everywhere. Keep going. Oh, go, 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 go. Trying to deploy the RC drone, and definitely gonna need stitches.
Right here.
Bosch Icon wiper blades. How storm chasers clear